is the Cora and Fremont Older House in Cupertino. And Cora Older was very, very involved in the design of this house. Another couple who was very involved with their community. Yeah, I think a lot of people have been here. It's open once a year. This house represents more than Prairie, the emerging modern movement. And again, it's a real shock to see that something like this was built in 1914. So Fremont Older was the editor of several different, sequentially, San Francisco newspapers, and he was a social reformer, both of them were. She was a writer. She wrote a lot of books. She wrote a column in the San Jose papers called When San Jose Was Young. And they were both very involved in prison reform and other community movements or causes. And Fremont commuted from there to San Francisco, and he died on his way to work and Cora outlived him by about 35 years and stayed at this house. And in the 70s, when she died, the house was going to be demolished. It was bought by Mid-Peninsula Open Space Project. They were going to demolish the house. It had been vandalized so badly between the time she went to a nursing home and died. It was absolutely destroyed by squatters. And so it has a happy ending, though, because Morton Elaine Levine rescued the house. He was also a newspaper man. And they came in and agreed to pay for all of the repairs to the home, and in exchange they get to live there, and they open it up to the community one day a year. So if you haven't seen it yet, it's usually open in April, and you have to call in advance to make reservations. It's probably the only house of this slide deck that you're going to be able to walk into. So here's a view of the terrace and the view, and you can see how it was really part of its environment and why she would have loved that house so much. This house was done in Heritage Park also for Ollie and Charles Mockbee, and we see some of the repeated designs, the trellis work and the second-story terrace, and now Wolfe is getting into more of these two-story homes. As I said, he was always on the ball, trying something new and different. And Charles Mockbee was the son of the founder of Mountain View, Jacob Mockbee, and he was, his wife Ollie and he bought one of the biggest properties in Heritage Park and one of the nicest houses, and lived there for a few more years, and then they moved to San Francisco. But this is a picture of Ollie Mockbee in front of her house, in her new house, new car, around the time it was built. Love this photo. Wow. Here we have an example of a Prairie-style Wolfe apartment building, and this has got really all of the beautiful decorative elements we see. Decorative tile and stained glass and this plaster work that shows up on some of the other Wolfe Prairies at this time. And it's really a wonderful building. The Prussia Apartments, Willard Prussia owned a big department store downtown, and he and his wife lived on the second floor here in a very elegant, fine apartment that was on a par with the houses as far as the stained glass work inside and the ornate woodwork and everything. The apartment building itself has apartments ranging from somewhat plain to the very fancy one, and they're all still available for rent. So it's a great place, and it's pretty much untouched. It's even got a little like the older house. It's got rooftop living space, and the tenants go up and hang out on the roof. Another apartment building done for the Wards. William and Mary Ward owned the mortuary next door to this building, and they had this building done, I believe, so they would have a more convenient place to get to work. Mary Ward was called the Lady Embalmer. She was the first embalmer female in the state. And this is an absolutely gorgeous building. It's kind of covered with trees, and you can't see in my picture all of the beautiful decorative work here, but it is one gorgeous building. So Wolfe and Wolfe did a lot of schools as well. They did the Sunnyvale School in 1915, and we see kind of a combination of classical revival and then the Prairie elements here. And I only have a drawing of it because the photos I have are kind of cut off because it's such a wide building, it was hard to get it all on a camera. But if you ever want to see kind of what it looked like in real life, go over to Milpitas, where the same year, Wolfe did the grammar school there. That today is the library. So in 1917, Wolfe formed a partnership with William Ernest Higgins, and by 1920, the prairie style was losing favor nationally, and they produced only a few more prairie houses. It was after World War I, people wanted the period revival styles, and prairie was just not considered. There was even a nasty article in the San Jose Mercury about it during that year. You know, it was just not the thing anymore, so everybody was looking for the next new thing. But there were still a few people who were getting prairie houses. We have the Oliver House in Hayward, which is in the park today, and you see it even has a very nice prairie-style water tower with it. It's one of the biggest prairies, and I think part of the reason that this one was still built after the style had gone out of favor was because it took several years between design and actually building it. Because Adolph Oliver, who, while very, very wealthy, they owned the Oliver Salt Works, he was really interested in farming, and he decided to use the eucalyptus that his father-in-law had been talked into growing in one of the get-rich-quick schemes that people were falling for back then. And he decided he was going to cure this wood and do the entire interior of the house in eucalyptus. So you can see, same house, beautiful wood everywhere. And although it was built in 1920, here's the exact same tile we saw on the front of the Cole house, built in 1912. So I don't know about you, but I don't know too many people who keep the same boxes of tiles 10 years later after they've done something. We have another prairie house done in 1921 for Francis and Sal Termino. Very much like the Cole house, kind of a replica of it, and the reason for that is Sal Termino's father wanted to keep his son in San Jose and have him become an orchardist. He had married a woman from San Francisco and they were going to move, and his father went out and bought him a 20-acre orchard and had this beautiful house built on it. And unbelievably, the couple turned up their noses at it and refused to move into it and let it go into foreclosure. Eventually, they borrowed against it, and I heard they ran a speakeasy in there too. It makes a good speakeasy. Here's the tiles again. So they were able to replicate the Cole house with a reverse floor plan and make it a little more modern. It's a little more open than the Cole house was, but very similar to Sterling. Here's a picture of the interior. And the dining room, very similar to the one we saw earlier. So, since they weren't doing prairies anymore, Wolfe and Higgins, once they'd gotten together, were also looking for their signature style. And they had a couple that they came up with. Higgins had been doing Dutch colonial revival before he partnered with Wolfe, and they did one of those in Sunnyvale. And luckily it's still standing. It's kind of surrounded by apartments, I guess, but it's still there. Mary?